Hello, we are now on with Dr. Brandy Lynch. Dr. Lynch is an assistant professor at the University of Central Missouri in the School of Teaching and Learning, where she began her career in 2017. She earned her PhD in sport and exercise science from the University of Northern Colorado. Brandy specializes in the application of technology in instruction and the analysis of effective teaching. Her research focuses primarily on pre-service physical education teachers. She is currently on the MOSHAPE EDI task force and is a member of the 2020 class of Kaufman Education Fellows through the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. Dr. Lynch also received the UCM College of Education New Faculty Achievement Award for the 2019-2020 academic year. And in 2020, Brandy earned a Kansas City Teacher Education Collaborative course development grant to promote culturally informed and responsive teacher candidates who are prepared for employment in urban education. You've done it all, Dr. Lynch.
Woo! That was quite the intro. Who wrote that? Oh my goodness.
All right, who wrote that? And just real quick, Dr. Lynch is here with us. Her title is "What Are You Guys Doing to Address Inclusion in HPE PETE and HETE Programs?" So Dr. Lynch, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate the opportunity to just speak a little bit on this really important topic today. I do want to disclaim right at the beginning that I would not consider myself an expert in inclusiveness. I feel like I have been an active and intentional participant in the really hard work of social justice within education and, man, just within life over the last couple years. And so that's been a conviction and a passion of mine, but not necessarily strictly focused on inclusiveness or inclusion in HPE or PETE HETE, but I would consider myself a curator of credible sources and resources to help people in these endeavors. And so that's kind of, I want to share my lived experience with some of these topics, why it matters to me, why it's important, and then just share out some of the resources that I've found to address these topics. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is my why. So why does this matter? A couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was approached to teach a diversity and social justice course through the College of Education at here at UCM. And I thought that sounds really interesting. I'm not sure exactly where my qualifications come in, but they pinpointed a few things. And so I got to work. And so I've been able to teach this diversity and social justice class for the last couple semesters, and just really embraced getting kicked in the face constantly by all of these things that I just wasn't aware of. Like, I don't even know that it was ignorance as much as just I was really naive and I was just focused on what impacted me. And so I accepted the offer to be a part of this panel today because I've just really been trying to live my life as a professional and as just a good person with this quote that says, "Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better." And I feel like when you have eyes to see some of the issues and some of the things that are going on in education and in the world, you can't unsee that stuff. And so I've always been passionate, and I've been striving for excellence in my career and in my work with teacher candidates since I started. But especially in the last probably year, I would say that, man, I just know so much better now. And so I just want to do better, and I want to share that. So that's kind of where I'm going today. So first, a quick story to kind of paint the picture of where I have seen some issues with inclusiveness when it comes to gender and all the things that could be wrapped up in that word or that construct. So think about this. Once upon a time, there was a teacher candidate, and they were helping teach a junior high dance unit. And some of the rules that the cooperating teachers put into place included girls can only dance with boys and boys can only dance with girls. So that kind of created a problem, because if there were more boys than girls, that means that girls had to sit out in the bleachers or on the floor until a boy was available to ask them to dance. Another one of the rules was the boys got to choose their own partners, and they were the only ones who were allowed to choose their partners. So if they asked a question such as, may I have the next dance? A girl had to say yes. She had to say yes. Another one was that, she had to accept that invitation no matter what. And then when they got into teaching the dances, the boys always led and the girls always had to follow. And so you might be thinking, wait a minute. So when was this? Is this a story about PE way back in the day? And so I went and looked at, when were those the types of rules and the types of guidelines that were put out as best practice for dancing. And I found this little article called Social Dancing in Junior High. And it came out in 1953. So a couple of the excerpts from here talked about etiquette. At the end of the etiquette portion, it says, it is not good form for a girl to refuse to dance unless she is ill or not dancing. If she declines one dance, she should not dance anymore. And that's essentially what happened with the student teacher. But it was not 1953. One of the things that they wanted to assess in this article from almost 70 years ago was, can the boys lead well and can the girls follow well? And then one other aspect of it was that they wanted to stress to the boys to not be afraid to hold their partners firmly, that the girls wouldn't bite them, but don't let the boys crush the girls with the grip of a boa constrictor, right? So we really need to focus on that. Those words were echoed in this dance unit taught within the school where this student teacher was at, where there were comments made like, boys, now's your chance to ask any girl that you want to dance, and she cannot tell you no. Boys, don't be afraid. It's just a bra strap. Just keep your hand right there. Girls, let the boys lead. Boys, you need to stand up and be leaders, right? This was not a story about, my great-great-grandparents' student teaching experience. This was an experience that a student teacher had since I've been in higher education. And it just floored me. It blew my mind that this is something that's still happening in schools and that no one has an issue with it, right? There was also another whole part to it that this article obviously didn't address, because I don't think they addressed things like having transgender students in class with you. And there was a trans student who was female biologically at birth, identified as male, had a male name, wore male gendered clothes, right? And because it wasn't documented somewhere at the school, this transgendered boy had to dance with another boy because it wasn't documented somewhere. It ended up they ended up figuring that out, that part of it out, but it put that student in a really awkward position. Not to mention the fact that the student teacher was also LGBT, identified as LGBT. And so it blew my mind. And I had no idea how that's even still possible, but we have to do better. As we talked through that, I saw in the last year or so that there was actually a situation in Utah where students did dance within the curriculum, and then the school hosted a couple dances over the course of the year so that students could practice, their dancing in a dance setting. And it was a rule that a girl had to dance with a boy if a boy asked them. And so when this girl tried to say no, the principal told her, no, you can't say no. And the mom went to bat, and it was all over the news. When I was looking at which title to clip from this, I could have taken it from Today. I could have taken it from Good Morning America. I could have taken it from the Washington Post. It was all over the place. And at the end of it, the school apologized, and we shouldn't force that. But this isn't a journal, article from 1953, and there are still schools out there that are adhering to this. And there are other more relevant and more up-to-date resources that will explain how we could kind of divert some of these issues, or just make them non-issues when it comes to specifically dancing, but lots of things where boys and girls or students are going to interact. So that was just my, here's one time that I've interacted with this topic, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So there are lots of challenges and lots of opportunities for improvement when it comes to looking at gender and gender related issues. If you'll see in the GIF here, there is a male doing modified push-ups, but a lot of times our language would say, hey, you can do girl push-ups if you want to. So some of this, we're gonna have to talk about our language. And then we have to talk about gender stereotypes. There's a picture of a girl with the weights in her hands. Sometimes we don't encourage females to be strong, to encourage women and girls to lift heavy things, to get in the weight room, to do those things that don't necessarily fit gender norms. Just like this girl who is playing flag football, or the boy doing yoga. Within this realm, we need to address pronouns and look at all of the different aspects that come with gender and sex. Within that, inevitably in PE, we're gonna have to have conversations about locker rooms, because if it hasn't come up, there's a good chance it will. It's not if, it's really when. Oh, shout out to the PE geek, hold a wall sit. I'll do that afterwards, for sure. I'll do that afterwards. What are we doing? Share this, present this. Okay, so here we are. How we tie this stuff back. The Shape America, which is our national body, if you don't know, the name is in the corner, right? And Shape America has a really wonderful document that goes over appropriate practices in K-12 physical education. It's super long. It addresses all the things. Here are the ones that you could pull out that really address gender and gender issues that we might have in a physical education setting. So you can read this, you can pause it and go through those, but there are best practices that Shape America recognizes that we should be using gender neutral language, which is why the catchy title that we came up with was about you guys, because here in Missouri, it's kind of a Midwest thing. I'm not from here, but I've learned enough to know that all of my teacher candidates say you guys frequently, and being from Colorado, I say you guys as well.
Being from Missouri, Brandy, yeah, you guys, yeah.
You guys.
Guilty right here, guilty.
Yep, will you please raise your hand? There it is. So we are tasked with using gender neutral language. It might seem like a small thing, and when I bring this up to my students, a lot of them, even the females, say, I don't know why it's a big deal. Like, why do you think it's a big deal? Don't be so sensitive. And then we have to have these, we have these conversations about if it is offensive to you, if it comes across as offensive to even a single student, is it worth it? Or could you just change the word that you use? It's nothing off you to switch your words up so that you can provide students with a safe and inclusive environment. And so we talk about the language that we use, and you guys is a really, really big one, especially in Missouri. We look at creating environments that are inclusive and supportive of all students. I feel like as teacher candidates are trying to figure out who they are and what they're about and their teaching philosophy, sometimes they don't have the most life experience, or they came from small towns, or they don't have a lot of personal experience with some of these topics. And so they don't really have an opinion on stuff, but I really try to challenge them. And in higher ed, I think it's appropriate to ask our students to really step outside of their comfort zone and think about these things, because they might have some feelings about it. And people are allowed to have their feelings, but as teachers and educators, it is our job. I really believe our job is to have and create and cultivate inclusive environments where every kid feels safe in our space, right? And so I want to meet my students where they're at, and I want to have these conversations to kind of process through things that maybe they've never really thought about before. But this is Out of Shape America saying this is one of our best practices. We also talk about how all students should have equal opportunities to participate and interact. There's research that shows males tend to get more feedback from females, from teachers. I think from female teachers too. I'd have to go back and look at that. But males tend to get more feedback and more specific feedback about skill performance than females, where females tend to get more encouragement, like, oh, that was a good job, you're doing good. So we need to check ourselves on these things. And then looking at spaces where all students are encouraged and supported and socialized towards successful achievement in PE. So the way I see that being played out is sometimes there are situations where the boys do wrestling and the girls do dance. And so we create these gender norms about what types of activities are appropriate based on gender. And we got to break those barriers. We definitely need to address those things. So I don't think that there's anything I will say today that someone is going to be like, oh my gosh, that's revolutionary. Because one, I didn't say it, like I'm just finding this stuff from somewhere else. But two, a lot of this, I think it's just to bring it back to our awareness and to bring it to our attention to say, hey, those are things that we should be looking at as we teach future teachers, and then really encourage them to take out and utilize in their PE settings once they get out there. So when we're talking about inclusiveness, I pulled this from a really great resource that I actually found on Support Real Teachers. And it covered several different topics. So we're looking at understanding gender, pronouns and language, tackling transphobia, what to do about locker rooms, and then PE uniforms and creative inclusive environments. So when we're talking about understanding gender, there are so many, like this entire presentation honestly we could have spent the whole time just going over definitions. We could have just really laid the foundation. If you've never thought about this stuff before, it's a lot to wrap your brain around, that gender is different. Gender identity is different than gender expression. And gender expression is different than biological sex, which is different than attraction, sexual attraction, which is different than romantic attraction. So there's all these different layers and facets of gender. And so if we're going to try to deconstruct that, we have to understand what it's all about in the first place. And it's a lot to take in. And so we'll talk about barriers at the end, but part of this was I had never seen this visual of a genderbread person until I was researching stuff for my social justice classes, because it's just never come across my lane. I've just never seen it, but it's been out there for a while. It's on like version 3.3. So if anyone who's watching this is interested, I really just want to share these resources. You can scan that QR code. I wonder if you can see it, since I don't know if you can see where my stuff is, but you can scan that QR code and get a better understanding of all these different layers to understanding gender, so that we can start to equip ourselves for having these conversations with students. And then we're going to look at pronouns and language. So pronouns are, I feel like it's a fairly new development. Hey, Sean, when did you add in your pronouns to like your signature line?
I think when I started with Shape. When I started with Shape, that's when I started doing it. Because that was part of my learning. That's part of my learning of inclusiveness.
Yeah. So I definitely added mine in over the summer, because I'd seen it. It's not something that my university has taken a formal stance on, but it's all about creating that inclusive environment. And so one of the things I found talked about how we should really respect, ask people their pronouns, and we should really respect what they want to be called. And so an easy way to connect with our students and to start to establish these safe environments is to use their preferred pronouns. And there's lots of different types of pronouns. The most common ones are he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. but then there's a whole gamut of other ones. And it's on us to learn about these things. So when students come into our classes and want to use specific pronouns, that we respect their wishes. And then when we're talking about language, what we already pointed out, the you guys and the girl push-ups, but it's important when we use our language that we're respectful towards all students. So I saw this graphic like floating around social media in the last couple of weeks, and it's all about gender neutral terms to address a group. And so because not every student fits in the binary boy girl, you might have some gender non-conforming kiddos, then there are all sorts of other things that we can say to address a group besides you guys, or boys and girls, or ladies and gentlemen. And so a lot of this is just bring it to our awareness, and then holding ourselves accountable to try to do better. It's not going to turn off overnight. I realized that in my own life, I've started saying y'all, which is really uncomfortable and makes me sound super country. And I am not country. I am from Colorado. I spent entirely too long in Texas, and I don't want to sound like that. But if y'all is quicker and it's inclusive, then, you know, maybe I'll just take one for the team, and you're just going to hear y'all out of my mouth, which is so weird still, but I'll take it, because I would rather use y'all and I feel awkward than my students or someone in my class feel awkward because I said you guys when they're not all guys, or maybe there's our students who don't identify with gender at all, right? So in our classes, when my students teach, I'm in their ear, like they have a super cool, like they look like Secret Service, and I can talk to them in their ear while they do their peer teachings. And every time they'll say guys, I'll say students, I'll say 5th grade, I'll say Dr. Lynch's class, and I'll try to give them an alternative. And after like the 5th or 6th time, they'll start to use it.
So real quick, for those for our viewing audience here, Dr. Lynch said we can use y'all. That's what I got in the notes.
Don't quote me on it. If you heard anything else, I'd prefer it not be that. But if that's what it takes, man, I will take one for the team. I'm willing to do that I almost said you guys, for you guys. I'm almost willing to do that for y'all. Eek, you all. Sounds too proper. I haven't figured out which one I like best yet, but we're working on it, right? So I included a little bit of research that was on this topic, and it says creating an affirmative space, not just one which is tolerant of identity, can help in creating a safe space for LGBTQIA+ identifying students, right? And some people think that this is like only kids that are in urban areas or suburban are so progressive, and that it's like this new thing. But I'll tell you that we have students in really rural districts all over central Missouri, and there are elementary students who prefer different like alternative pronouns or don't identify with the gender. And so it's not something that people are like, oh, you know, I'm never going to teach in a big city, so it's not something that's going to come to my hometown. Yes, it is. And we can't use the cop out to say, it will never affect me, because that's just not good enough anymore, right? We know better, so we got to do better. If you're watching this, you know better. So another aspect is tackling transphobia. So our students who identify as transgender, they're in a tough spot a lot of times, and they don't have a lot of people to advocate for them. And so the first step in the resource that is down at the bottom in that hyperlink, it talks about recognizing transphobia. So they say, as the adult, as the teacher, it is our job to recognize it. So what does transphobia look like? It could be verbal or physical abuse. It could be comments directed at students about being transgender. It could be someone saying, we're not going to include you in this because this isn't for your gender. It could be another student refusing to participate because there's a trans student. Wow, that does not say participating, not even close. that should say participating. And so our first step is to recognize it. Once we recognize it, we have to address it, and we have to address it every single time. It's not something that you're like, oh, kids will be kids. They're just joking. It's not a big deal. This is one of those issues or those things that just like bullying, because it is a form of bullying, we need to address every single time it happens. And we have to just respect and expect that comments that could be taken as offensive are probably taken as offensive by those students. It's not, oh, it was just a joke, I was just joking. And we can't just disregard those things. So this resource that I found really put the emphasis on teachers to stop it every time they see it or they hear it, which we should probably be doing with any type of bullying. But these students are at risk for a lot of different reasons. So something that we need to address. And so some of it can be passive, some of it can be more active, but it's on us to recognize it and then to address it. And then it's the thing about locker rooms. This is one of the things that my students are always like kind of nervous about. They don't really know anything about. When they're in high school, it wasn't a thing. No one really talked about it. It's just, what do we do about the locker rooms? And so a couple of these quotes said, changing rooms are one of the most traumatic spaces within the built environment of schools for queer and trans students. That was research from 2011, but I don't think it's any different these days. This other one says LGBTQI+ students often do not find physical education to be a safe and welcoming space. So of all the spaces at school, ours is probably one of the hardest because there is that dressing out situation in a lot of places. And so there are resources on Shape America's website, and I'll give you the QR code in a little bit for that. Punch or jab, wait for it. I'm giving a little shout out to the PE Geek too, that they try to keep you active while you're at your computer, to tell you this is what you should do, this is what you should look like, this is what it should look like. But definitely something that when I tell my teacher candidates, when you're student teaching, you don't have a lot of control over what happens as you are a guest in someone else's gym, in their program. So ask questions, try to get an understanding. Become the teacher in a school and this is your program, you need to think about these things beforehand and have some kind of policy or have some kind of conversations beforehand so that when it does come up as a question, you are prepared for it. So I am not well versed enough to speak on what some of those options might be, but I know that there's lots of resources out there, and Shape America has some great stuff on locker rooms or changing areas as well. Another thing that has been pointed out a lot is the issue that could come up with PE uniforms. So some places you have uniforms, and sometimes the boys and the girls uniforms look different. And if they look different or whatever that looks like for a specific school, the underlying just kind of recommendations and strategies for best practice say that there shouldn't be restriction on who wears what, and a person should be free to wear whatever they're comfortable in. So when you think about if you have a swim class and you have a student who is transitioning or is a transgender student, we need to take those things into consideration. And a lot of times people just don't think about it until it comes up. But I would highly encourage those of you who are in higher ed and have teacher candidates to plant the seed of policy or having conversations so that they're not hit with these questions and then they have to make these really rushed decisions or try to figure it out today, but that they can really advocate and try to be proactive in addressing some of these things before it ever comes up, because we keep saying it's not if, but when. So Shape America addressed it or identifies some of the barriers to inclusiveness. The first one is lack of knowledge, and that is on the part of the students and on the part of the teachers. So in my social justice class, what we would come to a kind of a common understanding in the first few weeks is that you don't know what you don't know. right? And so there's that if it's just never crossed your mind, or if it's never been put in front of you, then maybe it's just not something we've really considered before. But then there's also this fear of the unknown. So we're scared of what we don't know, and fear leads people to do some pretty interesting things. And so in a physical education, teacher education, health education, teacher education program, I think it's really great to address that lack of knowledge and to have these open conversations. And I will be the first one to tell you that I don't have all the answers. I don't think I use the right terminology sometimes, that I don't get it right. But the point is, and what we're striving for is that I'm trying, and that I can recognize when I don't get it right, and I can apologize for that, or if I use the wrong language, but that we are trying to move forward, which is also the name of this entire panel discussion. And so I think it's very fitting that we have to address the lack of knowledge, because it's a barrier to talking about some of these things. Another one is community opposition. There are probably some places that are like, that doesn't fit here. That's not what we do here. But you have kids. There are students, and there are schools in these communities, and we need to address anything that would inhibit students' ability to learn or would make them feel unsafe. And so I think it's on us to address those things, and to be sensitive, to meet people where they're at, but also to challenge them, that teachers are held to the standard of helping all kids be included. And we have Shape America, we have standards, we have all sorts of stuff to back that up, right? And then the third one is lack of preparation or education. So there are a lot of people in higher ed that are like, I didn't learn about this in my doc program. I didn't learn about this when I was in school. Yo, neither did I. Really didn't. I had one semester of critical pedagogy, and we talked about some really interesting topics, but we didn't get to the micro level of like, what does it look like to handle locker room situations, right? It was very theoretical. And so there has to be some kind of professional development or something on our side to become acquainted with this, so that we can share it out to our students. So that's kind of the charge, that you can't teach what you don't know. So we got to know, right? So here's some other resources that I have used and I've found and I pull from quite often. I've used a lot from Jennifer Walton Fissett's book and colleagues. Their book, I've used that a lot this semester in my secondary methods class with teaching about social justice issues. So that's a great resource. There's also a podcast called Playing with Research in Physical Education. Risto does a great job of covering a lot of just really relevant topics. We have a couple case study books that will paint a really solid picture of some scenarios, and then ask some critical thinking questions to get students just kind of engaged with this material in a more realistic sense, if you can't find somebody to come in and talk about it, or guest speakers or whatnot. And so those have been helpful. And then there's websites like Shape America, and Support Real Teachers was also a great one. These are not the only ones. These are the very PE specific resources that I've pulled from lately that have helped me address all things gender when it comes to helping us be more inclusive in our physical education classes. So that's kind of what I had to share out with everyone today. And from what I understand, Sean, you have a few follow-up questions?
Really, I don't. That was very intriguing, and that was, you said it. And when it comes to all of this work, no matter what the setting is, when we talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, just like you said, what I'm a part of too, we're all learning this, because it's just new. And yeah, a lot of people have been marginalized, have been, set aside in their spaces, but we're all just in this learning mode. And that's all we can continue to do, is learn, and then apologize where we don't know, because we don't know what we don't know. So you said it perfectly. I don't have any questions, Dr. Lynch. You have anything else for the group?
I think that's it. I would just encourage those who are listening to this, maybe my students are listening to this because I might require it as an assignment. We'll see. No, they probably hear me enough. But if you made it this far, it means that something about this topic, it like resonates with you, and it's tough. Like, it's not a quick fix. It's not a listen to an audiobook, you know, on your drive to school for a couple weeks and like you got it all. I think this is a never-ending effort, and you just keep trying to do the best you can do until you know better, right? And so every day, lots of days, I feel like I learn something new or I take it to the next level, and man, I don't always get it right. I don't. But I think that the work that we do is important, and I think that it is necessary and vital for us to address these hard topics, because if not, we're doing a disservice to our students, because they will come in contact with these types of situations and these things, and they're not bad things. They're just things that they're not familiar with, and they're going to get out there and they're going to have to figure it out one way or another. And so if we can embed this throughout our curriculum, that we can come up with this kind of comprehensive approach. It's not a one-stop shop. You can't attend one workshop. You can't read one book. It is consistent, but it's necessary, and it's so worth it. It's so worth it because the kids that we're teaching, their safety and their well-being and their self-esteem and their confidence and all those things, those are on the line. And so when we put it in terms that serious, like, it's time for us to step up and do better. And not just with inclusiveness, but all the way across all the things with diversity, with the racial justice, with including those with exceptionalities. Like, it's a charge to say, we got to do better, and let's do it together.
No better words could have been said. If you want to show that last slide, Dr. Lynch, so people have your contact information.
Boom.
There it is, Dr. Brandy Lynch.
Holla.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.